everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm Brian Doyle.
Tim McNeil.
And I'm Robb Rogers.
Oh,
And Rob's damn glad to meet all of you, So, Robb, good to have you back. You had to miss us last episode. And it was, to be honest, it was probably the first time me and Tim didn't rip you apart for it because we actually felt for you, man. You were doing the difficult part of our job. So kudos to you. So,
yeah, that was tough. That was a tough one, but we powered through it, Brian.
Yep. So you got a week off from ridicule. It's all good. We were kind.
Sir. This time.
Don't expect it twice. But anyway, appreciate you being back here and glad to have you back here. It's always better when we got the whole gang together. So right. Good to see you over there. But as I like to say every week, nobody's here for us. They're here for our guests. And I want to welcome Jake Gregorich to our show today. He is the VP of Growth for Lyra Technology Group. And he's going to tell you a little bit about his story and share a little bit of his background and how things relate to a world we often talk about here.
M&A.
So Jake, welcome, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah, Brian, Tim, Robb, thanks for the invitation on. Excited to jump into things here and kind of give you my story and how it might relate to sales as well as, exiting and choosing a partner in doing so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. So maybe tell us a little bit about your background. Did you start off right in the MSP world, or did you start in a different industry and then, like most of us, find ourselves somehow getting involved with the world of MSP?
Yeah, I out of college, I think like most people, you kind of take the job you can get, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're really fortunate. And I happen to know someone at Pepsi Co. So I was involved in their management training program. Cool. As you'll probably get to know me throughout this interview, I don't like to move that slowly. And so that corporate beast that is a Fortune 50 company, in the CPG world where, gross margins might be 10%, and that would be considered good. You got the slow corporate ladder to climb. And, I'm someone that likes to move fast. And quite frankly, I don't have that much patience. In the interviews, that would be my answer to my weakness. I have kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I after 2 years of doing a few jobs at Pepsi in sales and operations, I decided to be more deliberate now that I had proven that I was at least a semi-contributing member of society and had a few options out there. I was fortunate to land a job with Impact Networking, which is a pretty large MSP out of Chicago. They have, I would say, a world-class sales training program. So that's really where I cut my teeth. Impact was going through kind of incredible growth at the time. And then I wanted to tap that entrepreneurial spirit. So I went to a small MSP in Chicago called Equilibrium IT Solutions. They had maybe 20 or so employees. And my kind of long-term goal there was to acquire that business as an entrepreneur and run it over time. The things that attracted me attract most people to the industry of quality, recurring revenue, very deep customer trusted relationships, all the things that make up what I would say are a very good investment and kind of a good place to be running an operation. Unfortunately for me, this was in 2019, 2020, when things were really heating up in the M&A market. So soon after joining, they were acquired by a national private equity-backed organization called Antiva. And so I went through my first iteration and kind of introduction to private equity and mergers and acquisitions and was a part of that integration process into the larger organization.
Jake, I got a question for you there. Sorry to interrupt, but that's very interesting. So where were you on the sales side in that company? At what level?
Yeah, so there was a director of sales, basically a sales manager, and I was like most small MSPs, a hybrid seller and account manager.
Okay. And so how did that feel being at that role, rolling up into that much bigger company? What was the feeling that you were getting there, and how did that transition go for you?
Yeah, so I would say the feeling is, wow, there's a lot more I can now sell to my current client base. You know, Antiva had a cybersecurity consulting practice. They did some application development, some work on the data side. So some more things in kind of the consulting realm that were representing kind of huge cross-sell opportunities. And so, you know, my team specifically had somewhat of bigger clients. And so we were able to leverage those ancillary services to really kind of drive sales into the current client base, and then use those kind of consulting practices as what I like to call the tip of the spear to get our foot in the door, gain the trust as a trusted technology advisor, and then convert those clients to MRR, you know, fully managed over time. You know, I'm not going to say it was all roses in terms of the operations, because our business was a little bit different and we were working with bigger clients in co-managed environments. You know, it could be painful going into kind of a central operation. There's just a different way you have to deliver it to those bigger clients. They expect some level of technology agnostic skill sets. They expect they might have higher demands, but they're bigger contracts. So I learned quite a bit, and actually it's probably a good transition. From Antiva, I kind of took the risk of going out and being an independent consultant. You know, while I was at Antiva, I also started a practice specifically working with somewhat of an industry vertical, and then ran that practice that was working with private equity companies and private equity-backed companies. They have specific needs like me. They're moving very fast. And so it was a match, I think, in that regard. When I think about picking, you know, lots of companies here, oh, what drives valuations up? Well, if you're verticalized, right? And that helps you also drive sales. You know, when I think about picking that vertical, I think what's very powerful is taking a very hard look at your current client base. How did those deals originate? Where are you, instead of starting from zero, starting from, let's say, second base? You know, there's no point in starting an industry vertical where you have no expertise and you have no clients, you have no ambassadors. And I think that was a critical area of success as I looked at our current client base and kind of mapped out who's private equity backed. We had a few super connectors that were in that world, and that was a big reason for success there.
Good. Cool.
That's awesome. You know, I think another thing that I probably feel, and not to transition back to when your acquisition happened, if you're somebody that is not a fan of working in the big, slow corporate world as well, one thing we've definitely seen and heard, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, is, you know, as you get brought up into the PE-backed arena, there's a lot of people that don't transition well into that because there's a new level of reporting structure. There's a new level of reporting quality that's supposed to be included in that too. And for many, they can't make that change. The accountability piece being a huge part of it. You're spot on.
Brian, are you talking about the employees there or the clients?
The employees themselves. Yeah. I mean, you know, what was your experience when it came to that, Jake? You know, was it a transition for you to go back into kind of a role where there was probably more downward reporting requirements than previous?
Yeah, you know, I would say certainly so. We were fortunate enough to have only gone through like a short period of integration. And then, you know, because we were focusing on an industry vertical and doing some things a little bit differently, I would say I left before all of the requirements of like, hey, here's your cold calling numbers, like here's top of the funnel expectations, middle of the funnel proposals done. All of those kinds of data and reporting things that would have to happen from a sales function, I ended up missing. But, you know, I have experience today kind of in my role with Lyra Technology Group. We have 20 MSPs that we kind of are a shared service to, and also people within Lyra kind of are the board leads of these companies. And so I have very much experience of being on that side of the table where we're the ones asking for data. And so maybe this is not answering your question exactly, but I would say when you're either the PE firm or the senior management team, and you're now requiring all of this information, you have to make sure that you're careful about how many requests you're making, because at some point you're going to bog people down.
Yeah.
And if you're going to make a request, you should explain the why behind it, tie that to performance, to profitability, to growth, and how when a company is profitable and growing quickly, that results in opportunities for the employee. I think that why factor is missing very often. And so people are like, I have to spend 3 hours, 4 hours a day on reporting stuff now. And why am I doing this? And even showing like how some of the decisions were made based on the data that came up. And if that frontline employee didn't report that properly, that value creation lever would have been missed. I think that's pretty important.
No, that's great. I mean, that's really, I think a big part of it. I think people that have gone through the PE acquisition process, a lot of employees are a little bit lost and don't understand the why. That why is not communicated to them. And, getting to an area that Robb likes to talk about around culture, it's very difficult for them to assimilate because it's a little bit less cowboy and Wild West, as it once was. And making those adjustments can be challenging. And it's always good to hear somebody that's kind of been on both sides of the fence kind of share the worldview on that, right? What it's like to have to be the reporter, and then, what it's like to be the person gathering that information as well.
Yeah, certainly. After my time there at Intiva, I jumped to being an independent consultant. So in that role, I was mostly a consultant to either private equity companies trying to get into the MSP space, or MSPs that were private equity backed that were already kind of operating. And that was quite a good experience. Again, I think it kind of, how do you become a consultant? Well, I did exactly what I do in a sales frontline role. I looked very hard at where am I today? Where are my current relationships? And because I had built out this private equity practice, that's where I already had existing relationships and had built up a great deal of kind of equity among those individuals. And so getting jobs as a consultant was not all that challenging because it was within my current network.
Cool. So that kind of brings us, I know you had mentioned it before a little bit about, being in charge of 20 different MSPs throughout the Northeast and Midwest. Can you take us through what you're doing now, what that transition has looked like, and how that's working?
Yeah, I would say so. In my experience as a consultant, I was about to work with a company called Network Doctor. They're out of New Jersey, right across from New York. And the Dave, who is a partner at the firm, called me one day and he's like, "Hey, we can't sign this consulting engagement, but you need to talk to the new CEO of this group that we just were acquired by." I met Elliot Hyman, who's the CEO of Lyra, and 2 weeks later, I went from free agent consultant to working with him because the kind of vision that he laid out to me, and from my experiences doing this consulting work, whether it was on M&A integration or on the sales and marketing side, I just thought, man, this is the business model you need to have in the MSP world if you're going to be successful. And quite frankly, I think we're gonna prove that, and are proving that in 7 months since I joined the organization. We're on the verge of doubling in size, and we're not talking about $3, $4, $5 million of EBITDA. We're talking about another digit or so in there. So pretty extensive growth. And I guess what was that vision that Elliot laid out to me that resonated so well? In my opinion, and in my experience, MSP services are best delivered locally. Why are they delivered locally? Are best delivered locally because the nature of IT is that things break, and small accountable teams that are in the market of their customers and know their customers feel a level of accountability to run through walls, jump on grenades, put out fires, and fix those problems that are frequently occurring. And as soon as you have this just private equity DNA drive to centralize, because that's what they've done in so many industries. And it's an easy cost reduction when you take two people being controllers and you make it one person. In the short term, I think in the long term, and I think it shows in the data that those private equity backed roll-ups that are centralizing are turning over and churning clients like crazy, quite frankly. And same with employees. There's a level of dissatisfaction. What Elliot had, he was, I think, employee number 1 of Evergreen Services Group, just so everyone's aware. Lyra is basically a division of Evergreen that oversees the 20 companies in the Midwest and Northeast that are our MSPs. And he was, I think, employee number 1. And so, he had been there from the beginning. And what had they done? They had gone and now today, I think there's 73 companies within the family of Evergreen Services Group. And those companies, after acquisition, they keep their company name and logo. They keep ownership of their P&L. So that local ownership aspect, they're making the decisions. When someone feels ownership, they go the extra yard because they're impacting decisions and they're being rewarded for doing so. And what do? We're almost a shared service to them centrally. So, if I want to push down a sales initiative to my 20 companies, I have to actually get them to opt into what we're doing. And I think that's the way you want to do management anyways, is that everyone should be bought into the mission before you hit go. And so we, by kind of business design, have to get that total buy-in prior to doing anything, to have companies opt in to the different initiatives that we think are going to move the needle.
Okay.
That's an interesting approach.
Yeah.
Keeping them somewhat autonomous, I also think probably helps with the transition for some of those ownership groups coming into this, because they're not relinquishing all that power in one day, so to speak, right? They're becoming part of the bigger mission. So that's interesting. Didn't realize that's the approach model you guys were taking.
Yeah. And what's great for them is like what was great for me when I started at Intiva. I got to sell more things. Like we can cross-sell across companies to current clients. That's the best way and the fastest way to grow, is sell more to your current clients. I'm sure that the VCIO toolbox in you is screaming
that's
that.
what we live on, right? It's, you've got a client base, they're the gift that keeps on giving. Go out there and get the gifts.
Yeah.
That's right. And from a scale standpoint, we can still go to our suppliers and vendors and we can throw our weight around. And so we can do what everyone else is doing, and that's driving down our costs. So when you partner with us, your costs are going down almost instantly. We can leverage shared resources where it makes sense. So, not every company needs a CFO that's, 20 to 100 employees, we'll say. We could have one CFO providing CFO level strategy to several of those organizations. And so you start formulating kind of what are our companies individually not good at and what do they not like to do. And those are the opportunities for us to provide those kind of shared services to complement what it is that drives their business and keep them in their core competency, which is managing IT and providing a good customer experience.
So to all that, obviously there's a huge movement towards the mergers and acquisitions within the MSP world. It's been going on for a few years at this point. If you're an MSP owner right now, let's say you're talking with them all the time. What are some of the gotchas that you would have advice for that MSP owner to look out for when they're selling?
Yeah, I would say there's some things that you should just know and I guess prepare the staff for in this event. And it really makes a difference if you're the MSP owner that wants the highest check, and then whatever happens, like just go run a huge auction process and take the highest check and walk away. If which the companies we tend to work with tend to really care about what kind of happens next. I would say, be aware that if you're being acquired by a national kind of MSP roll-up, that if you're not the first in a geography, just by nature of it, you're going to be reporting to a management team. So I've seen this cause so much friction over and over again because, just because someone was acquired first in, let's say, Chicago, where I live, and you're going to build a Midwest division around this company. That doesn't necessarily mean that Chicago team should be the senior management team, but by the nature of timing and that they were acquired and they've been in role for a year, someone has to be in that role. And so if you're rolled into that division, it's very likely that all of your people now just report to all of their people. And if there's a gap in leadership capability or competency on the technical side, you all of a sudden have a bunch of people reporting to a bunch of other people that they shouldn't be. And that's going to lead to the better, higher quality individuals walking for the door, because they're not going to put up with that for very long.
Wow, that's very interesting. How do you handle that type of that's a culture question, and wow, the skills gap question, that's big, man. How do you guys handle that?
We don't integrate the companies. So that's how we handle it, because it's a problem. How I handled it as a consultant to other organizations, is my recommendation would be a pod structure. And so you have small teams that are delivering, and you retain ownership within those small teams. And yes, there might be a manager of them, but they're not kind of influencing every decision that's made. I would also say, like, make the hard choice occasionally and fire the person, because quite frankly, they're not going to demote. They're not going to accept the demotion to now reporting to the new acquisition either. So it's a very tricky position. And so if you're going to have to get rid of someone, which someone will leave if you make a choice, no choice is a choice.
Yep.
You're going to want to just make that move proactively to not lose the very talented or, technician or leader within the organization.
Interesting. Okay. Look, I know we're coming towards the end of our time here, but I just want to get one more question in there. What bright spots should you look for in a partner when you're looking to sell, or when you sell to them, or when they're, you're going through that process?
Yeah, I think likely a lot of people do this because the MSP community is so tight knit, but I would really talk to other MSP owners and even levels down from the owners of people that were there after the acquisition. And let me just caveat this by saying all of my answers to your questions around the M&A side are not around valuation or deal structure or how much money you're going to get when you go home, which is what some people might be interested in. It's very much on the operational and sales side after the acquisition. I would say go, and if you care about that kind of thing, you're going to want to talk to other MSP owners that have sold to this organization, but also to like their people within their organization on how that experience went. Obviously, you have to consider confidentiality, but get opinions, and not just from the CEO, because the CEO is probably on the beach drinking Mai Tais, but from other people that are actually in the company, or even better, that turned over, and you kind of get the bright, the good, the ugly.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. Well, fellas, we are coming up to the end here. Brian, you got a last thought there?
No, I was going to ask if anybody had some closing thoughts. This has been great to, I think from the seat we're in, we hear about the valuation and the earnouts and all that kind of stuff often. We don't get as much insight into kind of the mechanics that's happening behind the scenes when these acquisitions happen. So this was great, Jake, and kind of sharing new information that I don't think we've really had exposed on the podcast to date.
Yeah, and the personality challenges, right? I mean, like you have to roll up somewhere in your management and your reporting, and like reporting fatigue is huge, right? They made movies about it, Office Space, right? TPS reports.
Yeah,
people get that.
Best movie ever.
It was the best movie ever. But yeah, so I totally get that, and like this was a different perspective on that, and I liked it. I never thought that the first person in the territory would naturally be the leader in that territory and get the reporting, but that doesn't mean that they have the skills. That's an interesting outtake and conversation about that. Jake, you have any closing thoughts here?
Brian, Tim, Rob, I really enjoyed the time. Hopefully we can have some future conversations here. It's always good to talk to people that have been doing this for a while, and I've enjoyed spending a half hour with you.
Yeah, I love these things. One of the topics that I think that we should explore next time that we do this is, the roll up that goes into the major organization. How does that sales, the sales team make it in there, and with the worry of churn and everything? I like your model there. So I think I would really like to explore that more. I think that'd be a good topic.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the time.
Okay, well,
Thank
for
you,
anybody
Jake.
that is looking to get a hold of Jake, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with with the information today, and this will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere that you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please go there, smash that like button. We'd really appreciate it. Jake, Brian, and Tim, really appreciate you guys today. You guys have a fantastic day.
All right, Jake. Thanks for coming on.
Likewise.
Take care, guys.